screenplays. He liked the script I wrote, took me under his wing, and helped me rewrite it. We didn't make that movie. It was called The Cover-Up. It was about the Patty Hearst kidnapping. But I remember the experience of working with Robert. It really changed me. It made me even more sober about this business. And eventually, I had a breakthrough with Midnight Express in 1977-8. Midnight Express.
Great movie.
Thank you.
Great movie. And that's when you...
Thank you. The movie was a low-budget movie. It did very well, and one thing after another. And eventually, I got to direct. I got to direct The Hand, which is a horror film. I still like it, but it wasn't successful. Then I went back to writing Scarface, Conan the Barbarian, The Year of the Dragon. I turned around and I did Salvador first as a writer-director.
That's another great one.
Thank you.
Salvador.
With Jimmy Woods. And then Platoon in 1986.
Platoon must have been based on your experience in Vietnam.
It was partly based, certainly the spirit of it. I'm not going to, 50% of it, I'd say, was pretty close to what happened. But what I saw in Vietnam was, again, maybe I'm seeing things, but I felt like we were fighting ourselves. I think the enemy was there, no doubt, it was realistic. But I thought that we had sent over such a big elephant to fight a flea, basically. And we're overdoing it. Everything was overdone in the American sense. So as a result, there were so many casualties in that war. So many of them came from friendly fire, killing ourselves. Somewhat like the Soviets had an experience in Afghanistan. It was a national humiliation. But when I came back to America, there was a period when people would not even talk about it. But when Mr. Reagan came into office in 1980, which is only about 7 years after the war ended for America, Reagan managed to restage the Vietnam War historically as an honorable war. If you remember correctly, you were there. And he said we should not be ashamed of that war, we should be proud of it. And that mantra has now gone into the national fabric. And you hear every president says the same thing. America is an exceptional place, fights exceptional wars.
Just wars.
Just wars, yes. Like Augustine said. I think you were there during the Reagan era, so you know that it was a very important change in the guard there.
And while you're pouring yourself some water, I'd like to ask you about JFK. I remember when I saw that movie, I was really very impressed by it. And at some point I thought, is Oliver Stone trying to make me believe that this was a conspiracy of parts of the American government or the business elite against President Kennedy, and is in fact even using documentary footage spliced into the body of the film to kind of get to me in ways that I can't stand up to.
I can only take you through the steps. It was, as you know, I had made visceral films, Midnight Express, very tactile. They hit you in the gut. And Platoon certainly was there. And then I did Born on the 4th of July, which is about a young man who's paralyzed in Vietnam. You felt Tom Cruise, and you felt his paralysis. So I always had that. I was this feeling filmmaker. I believed in get behind the feeling. When I read the Jim Garrison book, On the Trail of the Assassins, and I met him, and then I also read other books, of course, I felt intuitively that Jim Garrison had lived this story. And the man who wrote this book, if you read the book, and you would recognize that he lived this story. It's not made up. It's not glamorized. He gives you his case, and it's the same book he wrote 20 years earlier. So he wrote 2 books that were the same story. A man doesn't do that unless he has a very strong conviction. I say this because Garrison was one of the most criticized figures for having reopened the case, but he is the only public official who ever opened the case. The story was buried right away by the FBI saying that Lee Harvey Oswald was the assassin. All that information comes out in the first few hours of the assassination. They knew everything. Oswald was the guilty party 2 hours after, because it was a cover story that had been set up. So once you get into this area of covert warfare, covert action, it's very difficult to make an American audience understand what covert activity is, because everybody believes that you act in an overt fashion. The concept of a CIA or an intelligence agency operating independently of oversight and just doing what it had to do, wanted to do, it's very hard for people to understand. I think Garrison had that problem in his case. But all the evidence on that day, all the evidence is wrong. The evidence has been besmirched, compromised, stained. The best single book about it is not only Jim DiEugenio's Reclaiming Parkland, which is going to be republished again. Republished. It's very important to go back and examine the information that day. Also, James Douglas wrote a book called JFK and the Unspeakable, which is also crucial to the understanding of why and how. But Kennedy was a man who was moving in a new direction to end the Cold War with Khrushchev.
Could you elaborate a little bit on that? What do you mean moving in a new direction?
Well, it's a pretty large story.
But it's an important story.
Yeah, it is a gigantic story. He was moving in this. In Vietnam, he issued a secret order that was going to be revealed after the election to remove the troops from Vietnam. He knew that Vietnam was a losing proposition. It was called, I don't want to go into all the details, National Security Action Memorandum 263. 3 days after he died, Lyndon Johnson changed it to 273 in different language. That language heightened and heightened and heightened. Within 3 months of his election, Johnson was sending combat troops to Vietnam. He sent ultimately 525,000 combat troops. Kennedy did not have one combat troop there. He had advisors. In addition to that, Kennedy was moving towards negotiation with Castro, backdoor negotiations. All this is very difficult to do when you have a cabinet and an administration and a time period when America is essentially pretty hawkish. There is a feeling in the military that they were denied the ability to go into Vietnam, that they wanted to go into Laos in 1961. You know what, Laos, a small country. Kennedy turned them down. Kennedy did not go into the Bay of Pigs. Now, again, it was a CIA operation to end Castro's rule in Cuba. They thought that Kennedy would support that when the Cuban freedom fighters were challenged and stalled on the beaches of Cuba. He did not do that. So he took actions that were against the interests of the American. Here we go again. Deep state, if you want. Also, with Russia, he made an agreement with Khrushchev in 1963 for nuclear overground testing, atmospheric testing, the peace treaty on nuclear weapons.
Also his famous speech at American University.
Well, that was a speech, The speech comes on the heels of that. But that peace treaty was an amazing first step. It was like Gorbachev and Reagan. Tremendous importance. In so many ways, Kennedy was moving to end the Cold War, to get America off this path of spending more and more money that Eisenhower had warned about.
The military-industrial complex.
Yes. Which haunts us all. And by the way, you said earlier, Russia you have your hardliners here. Can you tell me a little bit more about why, what you mean here in this country? Where the pressure is coming from? Because I've heard Russian candidates for president are more nationalistic than Mr. Putin.
A lot of, I think, basically, I'm happy to answer your questions. I believe I was brought in.
I'm sorry.
But I'll very briefly tell you that because of the way Russia has been treated by the West, and specifically the United States, since the falling apart of the Soviet Union, because of a lack of respect, being told to just shut up, you guys lost the Cold War, we're not going to talk to you anymore, you're of no importance. The Russians, who are a proud people, have gradually moved in a more nationalistic direction as a result of that, and a more kind of anti-Western sentiment as a result of that. Oh, so that's the way you're going to treat us? Well, that's the kind of thing that you run into nowadays. And I certainly don't support it, but I know where it's coming from.
Well, the danger, again, is always not only in the policy, but the real danger is the accidents. The accidents that happen.
Yes.
The near misses.
The near misses, yes, indeed. Well, talking about movies, I mean, there are all kinds of rumors about the way you work, that you're very tough with your actors. How do you feel about it? I mean, you've worked with some great actors, right? Are they prima donnas? How do you act with them? Tom Cruise, who's a big name. You tell Mr. Cruise, do this or do. How do you work with those people?
No. I think the secret to working with actors is individuals. Everybody is different. Actors are not a group. They all came up their own way. They all have their own ideas. I try to work with them one-on-one. I try to put together a rehearsal at the beginning so that we all kind of a general sense of the script, where we're going. But that doesn't often work because sometimes actors are in different places, different films, and it happens very quickly. But you try to get a big rehearsal. If not, rehearse as much as you can. As much as you can. Nothing wrong with rehearsing. That's not to say you're doing it, but you're practicing. You're hearing it. And with an actor, I feel like it's like you're a bit of a coach. In other words, you could say I'm tough because I want the actor to do his best. I want the actor to find the strongest, most valid way to do his role. I want him to try. I want him to feel that this is important. There's nothing worse for me than an actor who approaches this like, I've done this before, I've done this 50 times, and don't worry, I can do it. I understand that attitude, and I understand where it comes from, but it doesn't make me feel secure. Some people you do want to get them, you don't need much, you need a conventional performance, but there are key roles in every movie. Let's say 7 or 8, 10 roles in every movie that really require attention and work. So cast carefully. If you cast wrong, that's tough. You sometimes have to let somebody go or find another way to do this. But there's always problems of communication with everybody. I try really to run it as democratically as possible, but as you know, a movie set has to go. There is a time period. So that's what rehearsal is for. Do it before you get to the set as much as you can, because a movie moves like a machine, like a train. And the parts have to go together, and we have to get to the destination on time. Otherwise, you get cut off.
I was, as I was preparing to meet you today, I went through your filmography, and I counted 20 full-length feature films that you've done. That's pretty amazing. 20 films, and I don't know how many awards and all of that. All of those films, are there any, well, they're probably all to a certain extent, but Are there some that really stand out for you personally, that you look back on with a sense of, I don't know, fondness, pride, whatever?
I used to answer that the same way, but I guess I'm getting older now. You know, because every one of those 20 films was very hard to make. Everyone had, every day you go to work and you have to do your best. And you fault yourself if you don't feel you lived up to it. For example, Alexander in 2004, I had a tough post-production schedule, and I had to finish it faster than I wanted. And I had a studio partner that was difficult for me. And they wanted to show the film too early. This happens to other directors. It's not, and it happens a lot. So the film that came out in 2004 did not make me feel that I'd done my best. I went back 3 times, actually twice, and did a DVD version, 2007 and a 2014 version called The Ultimate Alexander, which to me has finally gotten me to where I wanted to get to with this very difficult project. 2014, 10 years later. Platoon took 10 years to make. It was written in 76, it was done in 86. Born on the 4th of July was written in 79, and it was made in 1989. There's a strange symmetry to that. It was 10 years later for each one. And I never thought when I wrote them that I was going to direct them, because I was looking for another director to get it done. So I ended up being the director. That's the way sometimes fate works. Which ones? Yeah, sure, the Vietnam ones, they add up, because it was my personal experience. Certainly JFK was the most torture for me as a post-production, because I had never been so criticized, nor did I jump out into the public eye like that. I had been